I just realized I was on mute there, but good afternoon to you. Good afternoon. Hope you're having a great weekend. Good afternoon. We seem to be having a bit of slow motion with the network. I don't know what's happening there, but we shall prevail. If anything, we'll just have to move away from where I am. But good afternoon to you. Hope you're having a great weekend once again. Welcome to God's Girls, Women on a Mission, Wives with Wisdom. Good afternoon to you. Hope your February has been going well. Confirm you can hear me. Confirm you can see me well. We wouldn't want to get into the business of today and nobody can hear us. So confirm you can hear me. Confirm you can see me. Everything is fine. Whilst you're doing that, you know how we do it on these fine afternoons, Saturdays. Get your drink, get your coffee, get your water, whatever you need to stay hydrated so that you don't miss anything that we'll be discussing today. So get everything that you need as you do that. Whilst you're getting what you need, if you have it already, share a like, share with your sister or a brother that is still concerned about the vaccination, because that will be our topic today. So share with a brother, share with a sister, share with an auntie, share with your friends, your neighbors, your enemies, your lovers, everybody that needs the topic for today. Greetings to you, woman of God, Pastor Karine. Thank you for confirming that. So get everything that you need so you won't miss anything that we'll be talking about today, because it's so vital that you hear every single part of today's conversation. But welcome to God's Girls, Women on a Mission, Wives with Wisdom talk show, the platform that we use to speak to one another concerning everyday life realities, to share godly wisdom, godly principles for daily successful godly living and purpose. We believe that if our lives are not lived on purpose, they're just wasted lives. But not only do we want to live a life of purpose, but we want to live it in God's wisdom, because when we live according to God's wisdom, we are assured to be successful in all our endeavors. So that's what we do on this platform. We share godly wisdom, everyday realities, what's happening in our everyday life. We talk about everything. As women, sometimes we include our men, our brothers, because they are part of our life as well. And today, especially, we are talking about the vaccination. I thought we are going to escape this topic. I thought we're just going to end COVID-19 without touching on this topic, but the Lord will not have it. So they said that we should be official. We should start the easing lockdown process from next week, the 8th of March. So from 8th of March, we are looking forward to the easing down of the lockdown, starting the process of getting out there, and hopefully by June we should all be out. By end of June, hopefully we will all be free people. But then the question goes, what do we do with those that will not be vaccinated? What would we do with those that are vaccinated? Like right now, some people are still 50-50. Like in my household, we are still 50-50. I won't tell you who's for and who's against, but as much as we have people around us that have been vaccinated and they're still okay, one of us is still like, I don't think so. The other is like, you know what, there's nothing wrong with it. But at the end of the day, people are looking forward to the lockdown being over. But then we have a lot of people that are still not sure about whether they should get vaccinated or not. And I'm wondering, where are we going to? What's going to be happening when we are out? As some of us that go to church, for example, would you want to sit next to someone who's not vaccinated? Would you want a preacher that's not vaccinated to preach to you and perhaps, spread some, COVID? Like, how would you interact with people that are vaccinated if you're not? If those that are questioning vaccination, why are we still questioning it? For some of us, that's spiritual. We believed at some point that this was the mark of the beast. So if we believe this is the mark of the beast, when is the world truly going to end? How are we going to live with people that are vaccinated if they are now marked with the beast? So it's going to be a very interesting conversation today. And we want to tackle all the questions, well, some of the questions. I don't think we'll be able to finish all of them today, but some of the questions that we are having, not just in the world, but even in the church, amongst ourselves as women, amongst ourselves as children of God. Some men are having their in their meetings. What about our children? Should we be concerned about our children? We want to tackle everything that we might be possibly thinking about concerning the vaccination, because it's one thing to be excited that the lockdown is going to be finished. It's another to be concerned about those that are vaccinated, if you are vaccinated, and those that are not, if you're not. How are we going to interact with one another? Because it's a real world, we have to be real. Amen. We are not in church, but I'm a church girl. So share the broadcast, like, if you're watching us on Facebook, thank you for joining us this afternoon. If you're watching us on YouTube, thank you so much for subscribing to this channel and following us. Thank you for joining us this afternoon once again. So today I am joined with a man of God, not because he's a preacher or he's a pastor, because he is a man that believes the word of God. He's a man that walks according to the word of God. But he is also a GP. He's also an author. He's an author of 2 books, one called Value Shift, Learning from the Best of Two Worlds, and Smart Tips for Success, becoming the best version of you. He is Dr. Henry Akintunde. He's along with his wife, Jumuke. I'm not from Nigeria, pardon me. They are currently lead ministers of Christ Image Assembly in Northampton, a church with a vision for raising a people of difference who are making a difference. He has joined us today to talk about COVID-19 vaccination. Where do we go from here? Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Pastor Nomsa. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for making your time to be with us today. We really appreciate you and appreciate your family for giving you to us on this Saturday. I know Saturdays are usually for families. So anytime I speak to a family person or someone with a family, I'm always more appreciated because I know that they would have been spending that time otherwise with their family. So thank you so much for being with us this afternoon.
My pleasure.
So before we start firing you with all our questions and concerns, I just want you to talk to us about, COVID-19, the vaccine, anything that we might need to know concerning COVID-19 as we prepare to end the lockdown, hopefully by this coming end of June. So I'm going to give you the floor to just speak to us, and then we will come back and ask all our questions. So guys, if you're watching us, listen to this talk very well. If you have any questions as he's speaking, write them down so that we can have that opportunity after he's spoken to ask all our questions or for any clarifications on anything that he might have said. So God bless you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I will just talk particularly about the COVID-19 vaccine for the next couple of minutes. Before then, I'll just say a little bit about COVID itself. I think we've now had COVID around for more than a year. I know there are still people who doubt whether it's even a disease in the first place. I think all I would say about COVID itself is that COVID-19 is real. It's not a made-up disease. It's a real disease that can be confirmed as an infection, confirmed antibodies to, and real people are dying from it. So that's the first thing to say about COVID-19. It's not a made-up disease. But today I want to speak more specifically about the vaccine, and I'm just going to use a slide to do that. So COVID-19 vaccine, the facts, the myths, and the prospects. I want to start by talking about what vaccination is. So that sort of helps us as to how this COVID-19, understand how the COVID-19 vaccine works. So vaccination is any process whereby you develop specific immunity against a particular disease by the introduction of agent-specific but safe components, protein components of that particular virus or pathogen. So the importance of mentioning that is that there have been lots of talks about how the body's immune system can be boosted, certain types of vitamins, certain types of nutrition. All of those are nice and good because they help the body's immune system in general, but they don't provide specific immunity against COVID-19. So that's important to remember, that we're talking about specific immunity against COVID-19. The only way to provide specific immunity against any particular disease or pathogen is by vaccination. Every other thing just boosts your immune system generally, not specific immunity. Let's move on to the next slide, please. Now, the history of vaccines, immunization, which can either be natural, that a person gets the disease, survives it, and becomes immune to that disease for some time or for the rest of their life. We've always had an understanding of that for as far back as 430 BC, when it became common knowledge that people who have had a condition called cowpox no longer develop that disease ever again. And when the time then came that smallpox became a disease, it became very obvious that people who had had cowpox, which was a milder form of disease, were not developing, were protected from the severe form of disease, which was smallpox, that was sort of really killing people at that point in time. And that knowledge progressed to a point where there was something called inoculation, where tissues were taken from people who had smallpox and introduced to healthy people, and those healthy people became immune against smallpox by the process of inoculation or variolation. And in the early 18th century, the earliest form of statistics showed that 14% of people who got smallpox died from it, as opposed to 2% of people who got it from that process of inoculation or variolation. So it became very obvious that that inoculative process was, in a way, a process of vaccinating people and reducing their susceptibility to smallpox, hence dying from it. And knowledge progressed further until around 1796, when a gentleman by the name Edward Jenner, who is now known as the father of vaccination, did his own study where, rather than introducing smallpox or taking tissue from people that have smallpox and introducing it to healthy people, what he did was actually take tissue from somebody who had cowpox and introduced it to a healthy person, and proved that in the same way that you could inoculate people with tissues from patients that have smallpox, you could do it with cowpox. And cowpox, being a milder form of disease, came with less risks, and therefore people also became immune in the same way that they could with smallpox. And that was the beginning of the process of vaccination. As a matter of fact, he was the one that introduced that word vaccination. So that history, I've gone through that to show us that we've had vaccination around for more than 200 years. And as a result of vaccination, smallpox was finally eradicated from the planet in 1980, all down to the process of vaccination. Because of vaccination also, polio has been eliminated from the world. Eliminated to mean that in most nations of the world, polio no longer exists. There are only 2 nations in the world where people still get wild cases of polio. And once we can get rid of polio in those 2 nations, polio would also become like smallpox, where it will be eradicated. And that's, again, all down to vaccination. So vaccination has a long history and a good history of success in eliminating or at least reducing significantly the incidence of deadly diseases. Next slide, please. Okay, so that's the history of vaccines, but suffice to say that each of these stages, now we can read the history today, but each of these stages was met by opposition. People were always skeptical of the people that introduced each of those processes. At the time of variolation, the people who started it were made to look bad. People did not believe them. There were controversies around that. Edward Jenner's experiment, even the top scientists in his days did not agree with him. They did not believe in what he was doing. But 55 years down the line, it became law that all across the United Kingdom, people were to be vaccinated. So that is almost like what is replaying in our time now. Whenever there's new intervention introduced, people are always skeptical. Whenever there's something different from what is the norm, people are always skeptical of it. And so what we are experiencing now is not that different. In terms of types of vaccines, before the COVID vaccine, there were 4 types of vaccines. There's what is called the live attenuated vaccines. This is where the live organism is introduced into the body of people. However, that organism has been weakened in such a way that it cannot cause the actual disease, but it can stimulate the body to develop immunity to the disease. So common vaccines like MMR vaccine, rotavirus, yellow fever, the example of live vaccines where the actual organism is introduced into the body of people, but it's a weakened form of it. Then there's inactivated or killed vaccines. And this is, so the actual organism is introduced, but it's a dead form of it that is introduced, but still enough to stimulate the body to produce immunity. And examples are like the flu vaccine that most people get every year. Then there's also the other type of vaccine, which a type of, a little part of the organism, not the whole of it, is introduced into the body enough to be able to stimulate the body again to produce antibodies or immunity to that particular organism. And then there's the final type where it's the toxins that the organism produces. So these are called toxoid vaccines that are introduced into the body to be able, that are introduced to be able to stimulate the body again to produce antibody against those toxins. Now, so those are the 4 types, but the new types of vaccines, the COVID vaccines, are not in any of these 4 classes. They are entirely built on new type of technology. Next slide, please. So common questions I want to touch on today, and hopefully these are some of the questions in your mind. How do we know the vaccines are safe and effective? Why should we trust the vaccine? Is there new technology being used, and is it dangerous to you? When and how long will you be protected if you have the vaccine? Will you still need to wear a mask, or do you still need to wear one now? Yeah. Side effects that you could get from if you were to have the vaccine. What if you've already had COVID-19? Should you still have the vaccine? Where should you look to get accurate information? So we will touch on these questions today, and any more questions that you may have after now. Next slide, please. So are the vaccines safe? I think the first thing I want to establish when it comes to vaccines, like I said, we've had them for over 200 years now. And with vaccines, safety is the most important priority when it comes to vaccine approval. We have the MHRA in the UK, and they are the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, and they only have one job, and that is to ensure that medicines and healthcare products circulating in the UK are safe. And they are the body that have authorized and approved the current vaccines in the UK for use because haven't gone through their processes, they believe them to be safe. And with over 200 years history of using vaccines, vaccines are the safest medicines known to humans. They are across all medicine groups. Vaccines are the safest known to humans, and that's why we've had such huge success with them. And with the vaccines, even in the time that we've been vaccinating in the UK since December, more data has been coming as to the effectiveness and safety of the vaccine. That will continue to be monitored for the next couple of years to come to even see how to improve on the vaccines some more. But at the moment, it is already considered to be safe. It's already past that process, and more data will continue to be accumulated over its safety. So just talking about the two vaccines that we already have in that is as being administered here in the UK. There's a third vaccine, the Moderna vaccine, that has been approved, but would only start to be administered in the spring. The Pfizer vaccine, we know that from the trials, it has an effectiveness in the range of about 95% from having it, and that of the Oxford AstraZeneca about 70.4%. Now, the data in real life, it's matching this. In a nation like Israel, which is ahead of all the other nations, they've got real life data that matches that level of effectiveness, that after about 4 weeks of immunization of people having the vaccines, there's a 95% level of effectiveness noticed. So the data from trial and data from real life are matching this. And this is impressive for any vaccine. If you think about the normal flu vaccine that has an effectiveness rate of somewhere between 15 to 62%, and that you will see that this is very impressive to have effectiveness in this high level. Next level, please. Next slide, please. Thousands of people, more than your usual normal trial, were enrolled in this. Between the two studies, over 60,000 people were enrolled. The Pfizer study was much more diverse in terms of ethnicity, in terms of age ranges. The Oxford AstraZeneca in trial study was mostly in young people. Hence, there was some initial questions in some countries of Europe as to the effectiveness in the elderly people. But real life data, some data came from Scotland last week, is showing that after about 4 weeks of immunization, the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine is up to 95% effective in reducing hospitalization, even amongst older people. So the data that is coming from real life is showing that even regardless of age group, across all age groups, both vaccines seem to be quite effective in protecting people from developing COVID-19. And where they do develop it, it seems quite effective in protecting them from developing severe form of disease to require hospitalization. Next slide, please. Why should we trust the COVID-19 vaccine? The MHRA, like I said, they only have one job, and they've used the same strict standards that they've always used for vaccines for decades. No steps are skipped. It's important that no steps are skipped because the vaccine has come around so very quickly. Some people think that safety has been compromised. No steps has been skipped. What has been done is that steps have been allowed to be merged, to run concurrently. So some steps of the trials were run at the same time, like step 1 and step 2, phase 1 and phase 2 of the clinical trials done together at the same time, rather than doing it sequentially. So some of those steps were combined, but no important steps were skipped. And the MHRA's decision, as with medicines, new medicines and healthcare products, was based on independent advice from its own Commission on Human Medicines, following a review of the trial data. Another reason why this came about very quickly is that the MHRA did not wait for the research to finish before they started to analyze the data. The analysis of the data was happening concurrently as the research was going on. How was the vaccine developed so quickly? Again, that's another question. But there were so many things that came into place to help with this situation. Firstly, remember that this was a pandemic situation, a situation that affected the whole world. So there was a global effort with the best in the world coming together to work on a single task. Because it was a situation that affected all of us as humans, we were all in the same boat, and there was a motivation to do it as quickly as possible. There was nearly unlimited resources. Governments of nations pumped money, pumped manpower into it. The technology was already on ground. The technology that has now been used to develop these vaccines has been around for at least 10 years, being trialed and used in other areas. And so it was just about the right thing or coming together at this point to be used for the vaccine. There were so many people volunteering, more than usual, that you will get. For a normal type of vaccine trial, numbers usually will be around 3,000, but these were studies that had people 20,000, 40,000, so large pool of volunteers to be able to pick from in order to use for the study. And we were able to build on many years of research. This technology had failed in some areas before, but it was very useful when it came to be used for this vaccine. So that was how the vaccine was developed very quickly, not because safety was compromised or not because there was a vaccine that was ready to be deployed. The first two vaccines, so the Pfizer vaccine, which is an mRNA type of vaccine, a messenger RNA vaccine, and the Oxford vaccine, which is a DNA vaccine, or also called the vector-borne vaccine. I'm going to talk about them, but it's important to say that these two vaccines do not contain the actual virus itself. Like I said, it's not based on the old technology that we have for vaccines. It doesn't contain the actual virus itself. Next slide, please. How do they work? These are some links that you could watch later on your own, but I'm just going to explain very briefly how they work. So the Pfizer vaccine is an mRNA vaccine. mRNA is a messenger RNA. That's the genetic code that comes into the body, and the body uses its own mechanisms, ribosomes, to use that code to make specific proteins that code contains. So the code that is in the mRNA vaccine is the code to make the spike protein. So the COVID virus, you can see the picture there with all the spikes around it. That spike is what the virus uses to attach itself to cells to be able to penetrate into the cells. Now, this code in the vaccine is the code that contains the proteins for making that spike. So when the vaccine comes into the body, it comes into the cell, but not into the nucleus of the cell. It comes into the free fluid flowing within the cell. And in there, the body's system uses that code to produce the proteins that make up the spike protein. And when the body immediately recognizes the spike protein in the body, it recognizes it as foreign and produces its own immune system to attack it. And once that's happened, it gets rid of the spike protein, but the body keeps a memory of it. So the next time you're exposed to the virus, the body recognizes the spike protein and that memory cells will stimulate antibody production to attack that protein again, and hence prevent the virus from attaching to the cells of the body and penetrating it. So this is how it works. The mRNA protein is one step ahead. The vaccine is one step ahead of the DNA virus, the DNA vaccine. The DNA vaccine ends up still producing that mRNA that then produces the spike protein. But the mRNA vaccine just seems to be one step ahead. But at the end of the day, the two types of vaccines end up producing the same thing, which is the spike protein. So the actual virus is not introduced to your body. Next slide, please. So can it give you COVID-19? Absolutely not. Can it take over your cells and turn you into something else? Absolutely not. Because the genetic codes don't get into the nucleus of the body where it can take over your DNA. That cannot happen with these vaccines. When and how long will you be protected by the COVID-19 vaccine? So the two vaccines at the moment, and the third one, the Moderna that's been approved, are all 2 doses. And in the UK at the moment, we're giving them up to 12 weeks apart. The full protection would occur 1 to 2 weeks after you've had the second dose, not after the first dose. You don't get the full protection after the first dose, even though you get a high level of protection based on research data and from real life data, but you don't get the full protection until 1 to 2 weeks after the second dose. How long the vaccines will be protective for, we don't know yet. That's something that is still being monitored to see. There is now a suspicion that it's going to become like the flu vaccine, where we may need to be getting top-ups periodically. Whether it's going to be everybody, whether it's going to only be the at-risk people that will be targeted, to be able to give the rest of us enough protection, we don't know yet. But at the moment, we really don't know how long the protection will last for. Yeah, like I said, we may need to have like the flu jab. Why do we need the vaccines? This is the reason why I believe. So I'm providing you the information today to make your own decision. But I'm also going to say that personally, based on what I know about vaccines, what I've studied about them, the effect that I see, I'm very much pro encouraging people to have the vaccine. Because in my opinion, the COVID-19 vaccine is the most viable way out of this current pandemic. Otherwise, what we'll keep having will be one wave after the other, like we've already seen. When we feel like we're making progress, we may just be set back again because the virus mutates, new variants come on board, and things like that. But the vaccine is already proving to be a game changer. Now, there's a concept called herd immunity. Now, for a pathogen or any infection to continue to thrive, there has to be people within the population that are at risk of developing that disease, people that are not protected. The more people that are at risk of developing the disease within the community, the more that infection will persist in the community. The more people that are protected, either because they've had the infection and they have now developed immunity to it, or because they have received artificial immunity through the vaccines, the more people that are in that category, the fewer of the people that are at risk to the disease, and the less likely that disease can continue to persist in the community and that disease can die a natural death. Now, this is what we're trying to achieve with COVID-19. By vaccinating the majority of the UK, we are reducing, and not just the UK, the world as a whole, we are reducing the number of people available that the virus can infect. And after a while, when the virus can no longer find more people to infect, it dies a natural death. That's herd immunity that we're trying to build. It's estimated that we need up to 60 to 70% of the adult population of the world to be vaccinated in order for us to get rid of this infection. And so we're talking of billions of people to be vaccinated. Viruses mutate. The first time I gave this talk was December. We hadn't started to have much issues around mutations then. But now this is sort of a big, big issue. We're already hearing of the South African variant. We've heard of the Brazilian variant, different kind, the Kent variant. This is what viruses do. It's like you're fighting an unseen enemy, and the virus is sometimes anticipating your tactics and beginning to change itself to protect, to make sure that your tactics does not work against it. And this is what's happening with the mutation to try and escape the vaccine. But the evidence so far is that, particularly with the Pfizer vaccine, that it's still effective against the current known variants that we've got. And scientists are already working on modifying the current vaccines to make them even more effective against the current strains and future strains that may develop. But it's important that we all get vaccinated as soon as possible to stop all these mutations in the tract. Next slide, please. I think I'm coming to the end of it now. Thank you. So that's why it's important for us to have the vaccine. The side effects from the vaccines are usually minimal. Things like a sore arm, you could get fever for a few days, the muzzle could ache. It's those sort of side effects. Usually, no major side effects are known, except in people who may have some form of immune reaction and anaphylaxis. But it's important, your GP will advise you if the vaccine is not safe for you. But for the vast majority of people, the vaccines are considered safe for them. Thank you very much. I'll stop there for questions now. Hello, Pastor Domsa. I think she might have dropped out, probably due to technology. So whilst I'm waiting for Pastor Nomsa to come back on board, the other thing to say is that we're gradually rolling the vaccine across the UK. I think now in some parts of the UK, those over 40 are being invited to have the vaccine. It's important to have your second dose. So not just get the first dose, but have the second dose when the time comes for you to have it. Over 19 million people vaccinated in the UK alone, not to talk of other parts of the world. And the results coming from that generally is that it's very safe, very well tolerated by the vast majority of people. Okay. So that's why it's important for us to have the vaccine. The side effects from the vaccines are usually minimal. Things like a sore.
I'm on mute. My apologies. Something happened with my screen. I had to restart the broadcast and whatnot. And I could still hear you. I apologize that it affected your presentation at the end.
It's okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that presentation. That was so insightful. That was some information that we really needed to hear. Um, One of the questions that's quickly coming to mind, you mentioned that it's 60 to 70 people of the whole population is needed or required to in order to eradicate or at least some sort of to start the vaccine COVID-19 to start going away.
Yeah.
Is that even anywhere near possible?
Oh yeah, it is definitely possible, and that's why the Director General of the World Health Organization is always out there wanting to say that until COVID is eliminated all over, it's not eliminated anywhere. So much as each nation is doing its best at moving, we still must remember that it needs to be a global effort. And there's the COVAX scheme that ensures, the idea is to ensure that poorer nations that may not be able to afford it still would get supplies of the vaccine. So it is very possible, yes.
Oh, wow. Thank God for that. Thank you so much for everyone that has joined us this afternoon. Do send in your questions so that we can ask Dr. Henry before he goes. We've got about 30 minutes to do that. I see a question here. Someone saying, but which is better, the Pfizer or the Oxford one? Do I get a choice?
At the moment, people are not getting the choice. You may see that from the news that the rate limiting step right now with the vaccines is supplies. So it's a luck of the draw. It's what supplies are available on the day that you're being vaccinated. But like I said, with both of them, the data from the trials and from real life are equally impressive. Both vaccines are very effective. So there is no reason to be particularly worried about which one you get. The two vaccines are quite effective.
That's good. So you said you're pro the vaccinations, and you're a Christian as well. I said it earlier. You're a man of God. You're a pastor as well. One of the things that was going around a lot during the beginning of them talking about the vaccinations was that they use the remains of. I'm trying to remember the correct terminology. When people do abortions, the remains of the aborted fetuses. How true is that? And how, if it's true, how do we go about it as Christians? Because that's something that most Christians, well, all Christians should be against abortion. But then, if the vaccine is using fetus remains, does that not contradict our faith?
Yeah, thank you. I saw that video clip that was spreading then. And one of the first questions that came to my mind was, at that time, the vaccine had not even been manufactured. It was still at the trial stage. And whoever circulated that video clip, one of the first questions that came to my mind, how did they get like the vaccine package like that in what they were showing? And Pfizer have clearly denied it. So the MRC5, so this are using cells of aborted fetus that people are talking about, or that was being talked about at that time, was based on what is called MRC5. Now, MRC5 is from as far back as the 1960s, I believe. So a long time ago, when the cells of two aborted fetuses where they kept some of those cells and cloned them to be using for human studies, for medical studies. So some vaccines were used for that. Those cells were used for the study of some vaccines and a few other studies. Not specifically with this particular study. So those cells are not put in the vaccines. They are used to test how human cells respond to the vaccines, and sometimes to culture to see how it works within human cells. So that's the first thing to say. You don't have enough to be able to put in millions and billions of vaccines to give to the whole world. So they are used in the lab to see how human cells respond to that. But the beauty of this particular type of vaccines, and this is another reason why the vaccines could be made so quickly, is that they don't require that kind of process. They don't. Because what you're doing is using codes that the body can use to then produce a particular protein. So you are not culturing the virus itself live within the lab to try and then put them in a vaccine production. So that information is completely wrong. It's erroneous. It was designed to particularly discourage people from having the vaccine.
Wow. Fake news. Talk about fake news. This is why we need to be careful, people, because so many times we read something and we run with it as the gospel. And so that's one of the reasons I believe most people up to today are still against taking the vaccine, because they're thinking it's violating my Christian faith. And there you go. They have to experiment with it because, after all, someone did abort and they need some of the human cells, which kind of makes sense. Because again, if something is tested on animals, I believe that there's still some humans that okay, they tested on an animal. I'm not an animal. How am I going to believe that works on me? So there you go on that question. One of the things that the government said, I'll put it on the screen, was they aim for everyone who is over 50 and over or at risk to have been offered the first dose of the vaccine by 15th April, and for everyone aged 18 and over to have been offered the first dose by the 31st. Now, some people are still waiting to see the results of those that have been vaccinated. And I've heard some people saying, I'm going to give it up to a year. If that nothing happens to that person or those people, then I will get my vaccine. And with these dates that the government are giving, I mean, how do we, or how would you now convince people that for what the government is trying to do, you have to take your vaccine? You can't wait for a year or for whatever months for someone that you know or you've heard of to see what's going to happen to them.
Yeah, absolutely. The the government have been very careful in their choice of the word is to offer. So people will be offered. People still have to make the decision to take it up. And my personal view is that people should take up that offer. Firstly, what is happening, and more obvious with the newer strains of the virus, at the beginning, it seemed to be mostly older people who were getting sick from the virus. Now, younger, active people are getting sick from it, needing hospitalization from it. So that's a change in the in how infectious the disease has become. And so people are potentially putting themselves at risk by not having the vaccine. There's no point waiting for that long. We've already had more than 90,000 people have the vaccines during trials more than a year ago. We've already had people have that. We've had in the UK now over 19 million people of all ages vaccinated. We've not heard of any adverse effect to the point of somebody dying from the vaccine. So really the question is, well, what are people waiting for? We have over 200 years history of the use of vaccines. Not this particular vaccine, but the vaccine technology has been around for a while. We know how safe vaccines are. They are the safest medicines known to man. So I think people will be unduly putting themselves at risk wanting to wait for that long.
That sounds like wisdom. It is wisdom. But then with the notion that the government doesn't always tell us the truth, they tell us what they want us to hear. So if
I think I may have lost you there, Pastor Namsa.
Okay, apologies about that, guys. If I was too spiritual, I would say someone is trying not to get this message across. But do bear with us for the next few minutes for the last few questions that we have. So I was asking the question about um, the notion that the government doesn't always tells us what they want us to hear. So if there's any effects, side effects that are so dangerous that should make people not take the vaccine, they will not tell us that, because at the end of the day, their goal is to have as many people as possible vaccinated. What's your thought to that? To those statements, because some of them are coming from people in pastoral positions,
Yeah.
and they keep telling people that the government are just telling us what they want us to hear.
And I can understand where those concerns are coming from. There's a mistrust of government. There's some mistrust of the health service based on historical things that have happened. But as someone who sort of understands the science behind this particular vaccine and how the scientific world works, so it's people like you and I that are conducting this research. They publish it not on government websites. They publish it in reputable journals. The government oftentimes becomes aware of it at the same time as you and I become aware of it when they hear that British Medical Journal has published it and things like that. So there's enough independence in the system for these things to happen and for people to publish the information of the research that they find. And if the research is believed to be well conducted, it would be published, even though it may end up that some people may later find something different from that person's finding. But at the time of conducting the study, if it is believed to be credible, it will be published. So there's enough independence in the system to allow that. So I don't believe that there are some deadly effects of the vaccine kept away from us just to encourage us to have it. I think if there was, we would know by now.
Oh, we're losing you.
Uh,
Okay, for the sake of the network, I think I'll just ask you, Dr. Henry, to just round us off so that, if this happens again, we would have round off. Because of the four phases that the government has announced, in order for us to officially, hopefully, come out of this lockdown for the final time, hopefully, what would you advise the public that are watching, especially Christians that they don't want to have anything to do with the vaccine, even if it's for another year or at least, what would be your advice to them?
I think my advice would be that from the level of smaller outbreaks that we have seen in different communities, uh, vaccination has been proven to be a good way to help a community or group of people through an outbreak. So, like in the days when there were things like measles outbreak in communities, uh, people, scientists will go there, vaccinate all the children, and it was always an effective way of ending those sort of outbreaks in those places. Now we're having this pandemic on a bigger scale, and based on the level of knowledge available to us today, based on the level of technology available to us today, vaccination is the most viable way out of it. Now, millions of people have already had the vaccine. It's been proven to be effective. I have had the vaccine. I had mine as far back as December. I'm still here talking to you. Everyone I know at work has been vaccinated against it. So I know many people and they are doing well, haven't had it. I think you put yourself at risk wanting to wait until later. I would suggest once you get the invite that you should honor that invite and have your vaccination. That's the way you can guarantee that you'll be protected. And until such a time as we're advised otherwise, continue to maintain social distancing, continue to maintain hand hygiene, because we are not all really safe until the majority of us have had it, and there are very few people that are at risk of developing the infection in the community. So all those protective measures will still be needed now and for some time to come. But hopefully, we are beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And fingers crossed, the dates set by the government, if we all continue to do our part, get vaccinated, follow the rules, hopefully that date can become realistic for us. Thank you. Okay.